You're listening to Building the Broncos with Nick Kendell and Carl Dumler, Broncos country's leading draft and scouting analysts. Get on over to milehighhuddle.com to sound off on all things Broncos.
Hello there, Broncos country, and it is once again time for another episode of Building the Broncos. I'm your host, Carl Dumler, and with me, as always, I have my co-host and good friend, Mr. Nick Kendell. Nick, I appreciate you. You're toughing through a little bit of sickness here today, so listeners, I appreciate that Nick is here and ready to talk some football. As this man is an Iron Man for when it comes to football, that's for sure.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I think my joy and trip down to Missouri kind of running low on sleep and got some sort of bug, so I've been dealing with a fever and a lot of congestion and et cetera. But sorry for you listeners, I'm going to be a little bit more nasally than normal, but toughing through it. So thanks for putting up with me, Carl, and kind of being a little patient with me as well.
Hey, no problem, man. No problem at all. Well, make sure to look for us on Twitter. You can find me at Carl Dumler MHH, and of course, Nick at Nick Kendell MHH. You can follow the podcast Twitter account at BTB Football Pod, and make sure to subscribe to our show and leave us a rating as we value your input on our show. You can find the show on iTunes, Stitcher, and even that of YouTube. Also, make sure you head over to Mile High Huddle, an affiliate of 24/7 Sports and the CBS Sports Digital, to find ours and our co-writers' articles and all things pertaining to your Denver Broncos. This podcast is powered by Overtime Media. Well, today we thought it'd be a good time to really kind of dig deeper into how the landscape has changed for the Broncos. I mean, we've had free agency. We've gone through the first section, second section, probably in the third section about right now of you're going to have some value signings here and there, but nothing too crazy. And for the Broncos, I mean, the players that they brought in were positions of huge need that really, I'd say, changed the landscape of where they're looking here in the draft. It could have been, if they didn't get a couple of those guys signed, they would be forced to take a few players, wouldn't you say?
Oh, yeah. No, cornerback is something that, talking with Ben Albright, it sounded like the Broncos were very likely to go cornerback early because they really did not trust their depth there. And while it's still, I think, on the table, just because the versatility of Kareem Jackson and Chris Harris about to hit free agency after this upcoming season, it's not as much of a dire position for the Broncos. Same with right tackle, but especially cornerback. I just don't think the value matched up. But we'll talk about that here going forward.
So, yeah, let's just start right there. As you were talking there about the cornerback position, Broncos obviously spent some pretty good money bringing in Callahan, bringing in Jackson. I guess I got a couple questions here with this position because we're kind of starting with the positions that maybe – early on in the draft, the Broncos are not going to look at as much. Doesn't mean that they're going to ignore it. Doesn't mean that if a player doesn't fall, I mean, if you get great value, you go for that, right? But
yeah, Broncos aren't at a spot where they can be super picky. You're coming off a 5-11 and 6-10 season. You need talent.
Exactly. But I guess here's where my question starts. Kareem Jackson, he can play safety, he can play cornerback. Does that really play into the evaluation of the cornerback position of saying, hey, if we can get a cornerback, say that second or third round that we really like, we can just move Jackson to that safety spot. Does that really play into this whole picture?
I would be shocked if it didn't. I mean, that versatility you talked about is absolutely key. And while I am a believer in Isaac Yiadom, I don't think that he's shown enough that you can just totally rely on him. I mean, a boundary corner is still a long-term need for this team. So let's say a guy that they've been linked to that they like a lot, like DeAndre Baker, falls to the second round, or they're very high on a guy like Rocky Sin from Temple or Trayvon Mullen, Amani Oruwariye, Lonnie Johnson and Joquan Williams are guys skyrocketing up the board. Just we can go on and on, but I think that it's a position, and it's a valuable position. Even with Fangio coming in, it's still a valuable position. So you got to let the board fall to you. And, I mean, Vic Fangio's comments, it was just today or yesterday, where he said that, how the safety position opposite of Justin Simmons is wide open. Yeah, some people will be upset because Will Parks is becoming a fan favorite, and I think the play was up and coming last year, but I don't think it warrants him being for sure a full-time starter at strong safety as in a cover 2 scheme. So Kareem Jackson could be a guy that, if the Broncos do get the best 5 defensive backs out there in sub package, if that's another cornerback, putting Callahan in nickel with a second round pick, third round pick outside, or Yiadom even, with Chris Harris on the opposite side, I think that's a direction you have to look for this team. But that versatility in the back end, and specifically with Kareem Jackson, I think is big for building this team, not just this year, but going forward.
So would you say this completely eliminates pick 10, though, for cornerback?
I think that it would be extremely shocking if the Broncos took cornerback at 10 overall. I think that we start discussing it as a possibility if the Broncos trade back from 10 overall. Now, does that happen? I think that for quarterbacks, the situation, I think teams are going to be trading up in front of Denver. I think that picks the 8 and 9, prime spots where teams, it sounds like, at least early on, the Jets as well, looking to trade back, but 8 and 9 above Denver, it sounds like teams are going to look to target to trade above Denver for that quarterback. So will Denver be able to trade back? We'll see. I'm a little bit skeptical. So 10, yes, I would say that's too high for any cornerback in this class, given, Byron Murphy, good in drills, but small and not overly athletic, especially for a top 10 pick. Greedy Williams, issues with tackling, issues with consistency. Neither guys I'd probably feel great taking about at 10. But if there's a trade down, or maybe even a trade up from, let's say they've been really linked to DeAndre Baker before the combine. If there's a small trade up where they can get a guy that they like a lot, that's in the cards. But at 10 overall, I just can't see it. The talent doesn't match up, and now the need doesn't match up as either.
Yeah, I'm with you there. I would say second round, if, like you said, DeAndre Baker, they love him. I know that they've really looked into him a lot. If he's there, I could really see that being the second round pick just because he is a value guy. Hasn't given up a touchdown in 2.5 years?
Yeah.
Something like that. He's a very good fit and scheme-wise for what Fangio likes to do with his cornerbacks. He's aggressive. He has no problem getting in there and tackling. That's part of why I don't think Greedy Williams is a great fit at all with the Broncos. They look at the cornerbacks they got. They are all known as good tacklers or guys that are at least willing to tackle. And so I can't see him being a fit with the Broncos. I know athletically speaking, yes, he is a very, very talented player. But beyond that, I don't think he's a great fit. But if Baker's there in the second, or especially if Murphy's there in the second, I doubt he would be. But either of those guys, I could see them pulling the trigger. Otherwise, I would say third, fourth, fifth round is where maybe they're going to start looking for cornerback.
Yeah, and they definitely need to target a cornerback with some size and length. So I know Lonnie Johnson, he had a very impressive pro day, and he's a guy who's getting a lot of buzz. I wouldn't be surprised if he goes, back into the first round. Teams tend to reach on those long athletic cornerbacks. Joanne Williams, another guy. I really do like Justin Lane from Michigan State as a potential fit, a long guy as well. And then you even got guys farther down. I mean, Sean Bunting's rocketing up boards. You got Isaiah Johnson, who, 6'2", 208 pounds, and ran a 4.4 40. Wow, that's impressive. And then even guy like Jamel Dean, Michael Jackson, etc. So cornerback is a need. I do think that they will look at boundary corner to push Isaac Yiadom, and it just depends on how the board falls. If a guy's there that you like, absolutely take him. Broncos aren't in a position, though, where they can really focus in on singular positions in the draft. They need to look and let the board fall to them and fill. Just get talent. It really just needs to be getting talent because, maybe with Vic Fangio, the scheme changed a little bit. Joe Flacco, there's a lot of moving parts. We don't know exactly what the Broncos will be, but this team, again, 5-11 season, 6-10 season. And the 2017 draft outside of Garrett Bowles been a complete bust. Paxton Lynch set the team back, so you can't be picky. You got to let the board fall, and where a guy fits, a guy fits.
Yeah, exactly. And so then that brings us to another position here that the Broncos are pretty set at. But like you said, if there's a player that falls, maybe the Broncos pull the trigger. But running back, Broncos with Lindsey, there is some questions of his injury. I know he's not going to be ready for the April practices that they get here starting at the beginning of April. They're kind of thinking maybe OTAs or training camp itself is when he first finally gets back to being with the Broncos. And of course, then you got Freeman. He's had some injury concerns. Booker, he's had some injury concerns. So is running back maybe a little bit higher than some people are thinking, or is this really kind of a position that's pretty set? Maybe you're looking more the undrafted group or the very late round if there's just a guy that is great value that you go for.
That's how I look at it personally. I do think that, this is Devontae Booker's last season, and we haven't seen any real receiving chops yet from Phillip Lindsay or Royce Freeman. So getting a running back that can offer some pass blocking and pass receiving, I think is something they should look at. The Travion Williams from Texas A&M is a good fit. I know the Broncos have been sniffing around with a Bryce Love as well, and a guy that I think makes a lot of sense, maybe round 5 or 6. I mean, who knows how far he falls? I haven't done as much work on the running backs because if there's any position outside of edge rusher, I guess the Broncos are solid on early. It's running back. But James Williams from Washington State is a guy that I think would make a lot of sense later on. He's been a really good receiver in that air raid system and also a surprisingly good red zone running back as well. But I think I tend to agree with you that it's a position that, again, if it's a really talented guy falls and you're not really sure about Freeman or Lindsey, and as far as health goes, both those guys have had some injuries here, then it's a position you go. But I don't think it's a position you're going into the draft looking to add. I think it's more of a street free agent, undrafted free agent looking to compete with Royce Freeman and Philip Lindsay as the 1 and 2.
Well, and I would say when you're thinking, I mean, look what you just got with Philip Lindsay, undrafted guy, and he just rushed for 1,000 yards, became your top back. I can't see the team sitting there saying, is round 1 all that valuable when we can find a Pro Bowl level guy undrafted? I mean, I know that doesn't happen every day, but it's still, running back just seems like that position. If you find a good fit, it's not so much about talent, but a guy that's fit. Yeah. And I'm not saying Lindsay isn't talented or Freeman's not talented or anything like that, but it just seems like a lot of times that's one of those positions where it's not always the most talented guy becomes the best guy.
And hammering that home, specifically to this draft class, it's just not a good running back class at the top. You got some depth, obviously, some scheme fit guys, but Josh Jacobs and Miles Sanders and David Montgomery seem to be the guys jostling for that first position. But I can rattle off 5 running backs that'll be in next year's class that I like more than anybody in this class.
Right.
So I just, it's not a position of need for the Broncos. Running back is already a devalued position, and it's not a great class at the top, which means everybody's just going to be pushed up a little bit. So I do think Josh Jacobs can be valuable. I mean, he didn't have a great pro day, but he's more of an all-around player. That receiving ability is something that's becoming more and more valued. So I think he could sneak in the back around 1, but overall, not a great running back class. There'll be some scheme fits later on, but I think personally it's a position that I'm looking to go undrafted free agent, bring in some bodies, some deep sleepers later on. Maybe I really do like James Williams' fit. He's a guy that would be interesting to me. I know Broncos have interviewed Nick Brissett from LSU, maybe a Darren Hall from Pittsburgh. And so there's a number of names to look for, but I think you got to be looking for a guy who fills those niches, a guy that will be a receiver and a pass blocker in that Devontae Booker mold. But still, you got 3 guys on rookie contracts, all going to outperform what they're being paid. At least, odds are you got a 4th round pick, a 3rd round pick, and an undrafted free agent. So it's just not a position. And we got the West Coast offense, a Shanahan disciple coming in. So running back is, again, not probably a position they're going to go high on in the draft. Although we did see Kyle Shanahan pay some money for running backs recently, but still, I don't think it's a position, given this class and everything, that you just emphasize very highly.
Yeah, and that didn't really work out well for them paying money.
They did bring in Tevin Coleman. I'll be curious to see how he works there. Although they didn't pay him a lot. I was surprised. I thought he'd have a bigger market.
But I mean, last year when they paid their guy, obviously got injured early on. But Coleman, I think that's a great fit. We've already seen what he can do in a Shanahan system. Bronco fans should maybe block that memory of what he did to the Broncos.
Yeah.
But anyway, moving on here, we have the wide receiver position. And this is one some in the Denver media, D-Mac, have been suggesting that the Broncos take DK Metcalf if he's there at 10.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like I'm a DK Metcalf supporter. I feel like a lot of people are poo-pooing him because he had these not great 3 cones and whatnot. And I'm more concerned about the injury and the lack of production. But to me, if you have a guy of that skill set, that size, that jumping ability, that speed, and you're not using him in the right role, that's more of the fault of the offensive coordinator and system than it is DK Metcalf. Like Randy Moss wasn't a guy that you're having him play slot and running quick slants and whatnot. You're throwing the football down the field to Randy Moss, and you're letting him. I mean, it's literally called mossing guys for a reason. But get deep, long strider, and jump dudes, and that's what DK Metcalf is to me. I think he's not as vertically explosive as Randy Moss, but with that size and that speed, that ability to get off press, I mean, it changes completely how teams have to play you. That said, personally, I'm not going wide receiver at 10 overall. That seems like a position that if the Broncos had their rookie quarterback in place and didn't have a young, promising X in Cortland Sutton, that'd be a direction I'd look, but it just doesn't make sense to me from how the Broncos are currently built, personally.
I'm with you. Personally, I mean, if we're going to go weapon there at 10 for the offense, Noah Fant is the guy I'm going for.
Yeah.
I think to me personally, I think he's a bigger matchup nightmare because you're going to have to be trying to put safeties and linebackers on him compared to DK Metcalf, where you're going to have those corners that have some of that speed to be able to keep up with him, that are used to wide receivers being freaks of nature, all those kind of things. Personally, that's just the direction I would rather go. But I guess for me, I've always, as much as I love wide receiver position, I've always kind of devalued it a little bit just because I think you can find guys at the position in later rounds that can still be huge contributors to your team. I just never been, I mean, Antonio Brown, 6th round pick.
5th round.
No, yes, that 5th round. Sorry. He doesn't, yes, that doesn't happen every single day that you find a receiver of that caliber in that kind of round, but still it's such a needy position. Your quarterback has to be good to take advantage of that kind of talent. And I think Joe Flacco could take advantage of a talent like DK Metcalf, but I just think there's other positions of need and value that fit better for there, especially at pick 10. And there's other receivers that I like later in this draft. Deebo Samuel there in the 2nd. I mean, you're looking at Hollywood as well as another one from Hollywood Brown from Oklahoma. I mean, those are explosive athletes that, again, teams have to game plan around of that kind of speed and quickness on the field. And so, I mean, they're not as explosive as DK Metcalf. They're not as big. They're not as strong. They're not as intimidating. But I still think that they're great weapons that you can still get good value. I mean, this is a very deep wide receiver position in this draft. I don't think there's a ton of top-end talent. I mean, you got DK Metcalf. You got maybe a couple other guys that you could put into that conversation of being top-end wide receivers that could maybe really develop into something. N'Keal Harry being one of them. Maybe Hakeem Butler.
Yeah.
Kelvin Harmon. I mean, those are the big names, I guess, that come to my mind when I'm thinking wide receiver. But even there, a lot of those guys, I'm not taking 1st round for sure.
I think the only wide receiver that I feel solid top 15 is DK Metcalf. And then after that, an argument can be made for N'Keal Harry or Hakeem Butler. Marquise Brown, I mean, without the Liz Frank injury, I would say he'd be up there. But a 166 weight wide receiver, I mean, that's concerning. 5'9". Mm-hmm. I mean, the NFL is a big man's game. I know some people get angry, and we'll talk about Ed Oliver. Even then, that's you got to be an absolute freak. And I do like Marquise Brown. I think he'd fit better, but 10 overall, I don't see it. That said, I do think it is a deep class. So rounds 2 onwards, wide receivers very much in play, specifically somebody who can take over Emmanuel Sanders' position and offer the Broncos some more explosive down the field ability. Maybe a Deebo Samuel, maybe a guy like Emmanuel Hall, Mecole Hardman, Terry McLaurin's a popular guy the Broncos had been linked with a little bit. They did some work on him at the Senior Bowl. So we'll see. Maybe a big slot like A.J. Brown as well. I mean, that's kind of a unique weapon. But round 1, 10 overall, DK Metcalf, I feel like it's DK Metcalf or nobody else. But I don't think, given how the Broncos roster is currently structured, that I would take a guy like DK Metcalf 10 overall.
Yeah, if they take him, I understand it. I can sit there and say, okay, that's going to be a weapon for the offense. And I mean, I'm not going to be excited. I'm not going to be sitting there high-fiving guys, but I'd still feel like at least we got a weapon. Again, I'm not a big wide receiver in round 1 unless they are just absolute crazy freaks. And I mean, I guess he is in a way, but he's not the all-around freak, I guess. And I mean, there's just so many things in his game. They kind of remind me of DT when he came out because he was an athletic freak. Yeah. But there are so many limitations that you see on tape of things that he can't do that he's got to learn to get better at. And so you're not going to see the huge high-end production. You're viewing him as a year 2, year 3 guy that's going to be the big-time impact guy for your team. And that's if he develops. I mean, that's the thing is you're having to really think that this guy's going to be coached up to be something great.
Yeah.
And
I agree.
I don't put him in that group of wide receivers that I think is going to quite reach that level.
Yeah, for me, he's not a universal player, but if you're running a vertical offense where you're going to take some shots down the field and you let him run free, because he's going to beat press. I mean, there's no doubt about it. He's going to beat press, and you just let him be a physical mismatch down the field and toss it up to him 3 times a game. I mean, he could come down with 50 catches on the year, but a fifth of those will be for touchdowns. You know,
Yep.
like he will change how defenses can play you. You can't play super aggressive. You can't play a lot of cover 0 because if you do, you're going to get torched. So
Right.
I do see that ability, and that can open up the offense a lot, getting a weapon like that. I mean, you make Cortland Sutton on the other side and Hamilton in the slot or kind of moving around. I can kind of see it. I just don't think it's a true fit for the Broncos, considering I'd probably put DK at X, and I think Sutton is just a prototypical X already.
Yeah. I keep thinking of the Tampa Bay Bucks with Bruce Arians as the head coach.
Yeah.
I know that they're probably going to take linebacker there at 5 or pass rusher, one of the two. But you put Mike Evans on one side, DK Metcalf on the other side. That sounds like a pretty dangerous combination right there. That might be the top wide receiver combo in the NFL because they're both great fits in that style of offense. And they got Chris Godwin as well, who's a speedster. They got Brashad Perryman, who's a speedster. I mean, that team. Oh, yeah, O.J. Howard. I mean, that's some weapons there for your quarterback to work with. If you really want Jameis Winston to be successful, man, that would be a fun group to watch, that's for sure.
I would argue offensive line is a bigger need for them in that regard if they're going to run that offense, because it's a lot of 5-7 step drops, and that offensive line is not great.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
But like I said, that's the kind of offensive system I'm thinking of, of being a good fit for him. I mean, Bruce Arians is the most aggressive head coach out there.
Yeah. But I mean, for real, for me, it's you play him in that young DT mold where he's going to be more down the field. You get some screens as well, so you can take care of that long speed and just that size on the outside. And then you also let him play Moss. I mean, he's running a 9. If you're pressing him and you see it's a single high safety and they're not shading over that way, toss it up. If it's a pass interference, it's great. If it's not, still great. Like, that's how I see it with DK Metcalf. But there are concerns about him, production, injury, etc. So I think, I don't know. I feel like I would take DK Metcalf over any tight end just because of the positional value. But I wouldn't love it. There's many other directions I would rather go. I don't think there's any offensive playmaker in this draft I would feel great about taking top 10 this year.
And well, then that brings us to the tight end group. And this is a group we've argued with a lot of people on because there is 2 guys that it's kind of funny. The Iowa Hawkeye guy is the one that's arguing against taking an Iowa Hawkeye tight end. It seems like it's a lot of other people out there that seem to be really set on the Broncos, and I understand the connection. Broncos have not had a top-end tight end for a long, long time. And they're at 10. They have a good chance of having their pick of who they want, TJ Hawkinson or Noah Fant. And so it's easy to make those kind of connections. But there again, did the signing of Hireman lessen the need for tight end there at 10 for you?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. It lessened the need at 10 because you don't have to totally rely on unknowns in Jake Butt and Fumagalli. Now, what did he have last year? The broken ribs? Like, he's going to be back week 1. I don't have any questions about him being back. Will he be able to stay healthy? That's a question, but I think that he at least offers an average level type of starter at tight end. If you're counting tight end 1 and tight end 2's on team. So low end 1, high end 2 kind of guy. I do think that tight end would be a good pick for the Broncos at some point, but at 10 overall, man, just historically speaking, it's not a great position to take. And I do think that I do like Noah Fant's upside a little bit more, but I think TJ Hawkinson's a little bit more universal because he can do everything. But there is a precedent set where tight ends that run 4.7 in the first round tend not to succeed in the draft. So I see some people comparing him to Gronkowski, and I just don't see that. I see a guy who is a better version of Hunter Henry, a better version of Heath Miller. Now, that's a solid player. You're going to get a good player for a long time. But is that a difference maker? I feel like that's a complementary piece, and if you're picking 10 overall, you need to get a difference maker. Same with Fant. I think Fant's a lot like Jared Cook. You might as well just have gone out and been aggressive and signed Jared Cook if you're looking for that guy. So I think both tight ends are good. And if the Broncos do trade back to 15 to 25 range, I'd have no issue with them taking them, because obviously it lessens the dire need for tight end, or at least the dire impact of tight end there. And you're getting more assets to go around them. But at 10 overall, it makes me very nervous. I'll put it that way. I mean, the last time we had a tight end go 10 overall was Eric Ebron to the Lions back in, I want to say it was 2014. Am I correct saying that? Does that sound right?
I'm trying to remember.
I'm pulling it up right now. 2014. Let me see. Yes, 10 overall, Detroit Lions. Okay, let's go the next 7 picks after Eric Ebron went off the board to the Lions at 10. The next pick. Tell me if it was better or worse than Eric Ebron. Taylor Lewan to the Titans.
Yes, better.
Odell Beckham to the Giants.
Yes.
Aaron Donald to the Rams.
Yes.
Okay. And then it gets a little bit more hazy. There's recently though, Kyle Fuller.
I would still take Kyle Fuller over him.
All-Pro cornerback this past year.
Yep.
This one is definitely a toss-up, but it's for an unfortunate circumstance. But Ryan Shazier.
Before the injury, I would have taken him over Ebron.
Exactly. Zach Martin.
Yes, I'd take him over Ebron.
And then C.J. Mosley.
Yep, I'd take him over Ebron.
So I know every single year you get a new set of players, and every single player is their own individual. But, man, I think that your value of going tight end top 10 is you set yourself up where you really have – even if the pick is a hit, I just can't imagine it being that much of a needle mover. People are saying, Gronkowski – there's only one Gronk. There's only ever been one Gronk. People say Aaron Donald's a unicorn. Gronkowski is a unicorn's unicorn. There's been small defensive tackles that have succeeded. Aaron Donald, Geno Atkins, John Randall, Warren Sapp, even Grady Jarrett will say. But a 6'7", 6'8", 270-pound tight end that runs a 4.68, which may I remind you is faster than what Hawkinson runs. It's not out there. So you're not getting Gronk. Let's just put that to bed. That's it. He's not Gronk. So, and that hurts me to say. I'm a big proponent of Iowa tight ends, et cetera. But I think you're more likely to get a higher end version of Hunter Henry with him, and you're going to get Jared Cook with Fant. So at 10 overall, you can miss me with that tight end talk. I just can't play the value game there, and I don't think either of them is that much of a player. I mean, again, historical draft preference or context. O.J. Howard went 19 overall. O.J. Howard had some questions about his overall production at Alabama because they had other guys they were throwing the ball to, but when he was used in the offense, he was extremely dynamic, a great blocker, and a great athlete. O.J. Howard, to me, is a better prospect as a tight end than either Fant or Hawkinson coming out. Went 19 overall. So 10 overall, I just can't get behind it. I just can't, and that kills me because I am a homer for the Iowa Hawkeyes. I try not to be a homer for the Broncos. I'm a homer for the Iowa Hawkeyes, and I just cannot love the value of the pick at 10.
Yeah, I mean, and to me, you look at around the league, this is, again, one of those positions that you can find talent later in the draft. Travis Kelce, 3rd-round pick. Jordan Reed, I mean, without the injuries, he's a pretty darn good tight end. Again, 3rd round. You're looking at
Ertz, 2nd round. You got, obviously, Kittle, 5th round. Man, I don't think Cook was the 1st round.
Yeah, even Hunter Henry was 2nd round.
Yeah, he was a 2nd round pick. And then a lot of the 1st rounders have been busts.
Yep.
I just feel like it's a position. I mean, we saw, shout out to Thomas Hall, who does all the Tableau and statistical work for Mile High Huddle and CBS Sports, but he did a piece earlier, and it said that the 2 positions that are overdrafted the most in the 1st round, where the value does not meet the pick, tight end and cornerback. So, miss me with that. I think that I'd rather go for a Josh Oliver, Dawson Knox, Cale Waring, Drew Sample, Foster Moreau, Dax Raymond, Tommy Sweeney later on, than take Fant or Hawkinson at 10 overall and strike me down, Herky. I'm sorry. I can't not be fully supportive of that pick. There's just too many other guys I'd value there.
Right. And that's something we hadn't really talked about, is just the depth of this draft. I mean, I don't know if there's been a better tight end draft than this one. And so the idea of, well, let's take a TJ Hawkinson here at pick 10. And I'm not saying that you can't, that he's not the top guy, but I think you can get a guy that's maybe 85% of what he would bring to the team at a later pick in the third round or something.
Yeah.
And so I think there's value in the tight end position. And if you can find that guy that can be a two-way player like Hawkinson, I mean, that's huge. But again, we've seen there's just tight ends. It's so hard to find a guy that really lives up to that billing when they're in that first round. It's just very, very hard to become that guy because you have to become a top 5 guy at the position right away. And when you can find like a Travis Kelce in the second, third round, even a Hunter Henry in the second round, I mean, those are great guys that are still good value. And so even the second round, I mean, Broncos could be looking at like an Irv Smith. I don't think he's good
as not after the combine.
Well, that's true. But even there, I mean, say he is there in the second round, that's huge value for the Broncos.
Yeah.
So I just you want to get as much value out of this draft as you can, and I don't think taking tight end at 10 does the best for it. Now, if the Broncos take TJ Hawkinson or Noah Fant, I mean, they're going to be a productive player.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, I'd be decently okay with it. I'm not going to sit there and rag on the Broncos saying they just made the biggest mistake in their life, unless Ed Oliver's there too. But beyond that, I mean, it'd be an okay pick, and I understand it. I just wouldn't be jumping up for joy like there's a lot of people that would be for sure.
Yeah, no, you're correct there. And I mean, it's crazy. We see Cam, shout out to Cam, who's a big Nebraska guy calling for the Iowa tight end. And TJ Hawkinson, I mean, you got to love the attitude, no offense, you got to love the athleticism. But I think given this draft class and the historical context of tight end first round, it's a no for me, unless you're able to trade down and get some more capital. You know, then you're dealing with house money. But at 10 overall, nah. All right, well, we still got a bit to get to, but first we're going to take a quick break.
This is the Overtime Podcast Network.
Alrighty, and we're back, and we're going to talk probably the most interesting position in the entire draft class for the Broncos. Everybody thought this was a position they were going to go. Now nobody thinks they're going to go this way, and I think that it's still very much in play. That is the quarterback position. I was down at the Missouri Pro Day. Haven't even got a chance to talk about that, really. Drew Lock had a solid day, you know, a little bit up and down, missed some throws, especially to the left side. Yeah, but again, the arm talent is obvious. He throws that thing on a rope, and he's a surprising athlete. I mean, when you watch him, he can really cover some ground and look smooth doing so. But quarterback, I got to ask you, Carl, how do you think things have changed now that Flacco is officially a Bronco?
I think before free agency, there was a lot of thoughts that Flacco and Drew Lock really lined up just talent-wise, so it made a lot of sense. And I still think it does make a lot of sense. But I think you're also looking at some of the other pieces on your team. You're looking at, I mean, Von Miller just turned 30 years old. Was that today?
It was yesterday, I believe.
Yesterday, okay.
Yes.
And so you got a guy who's got maybe 3 years of prime play left, wouldn't you say?
Maybe 2. You know, I think 3 is optimistic.
Well, I'll try to be optimistic. I'll go 3. And so are you kind of looking at this draft and saying, man, we got to get some pieces around this guy to get as much as we can out of our biggest and best piece on the team? And so I think that question has to definitely play into this. I mean, I understand if they take quarterback because, I mean, my big thought is how often are you going to have a top 10 pick in the draft? You're hoping not. You're hoping not very often. I mean, this is the most. You're hoping that the Vance Joseph era is behind us, kind of like when we had McDaniels. You get that era behind you, then you have a lot of success. And so the idea that the Broncos are going to be in this kind of position to get a quarterback that they like. But my biggest question, I guess, when it comes to this is how much do they really like these quarterbacks? Because I like them, I don't love them. When I watch each of these quarterbacks, there's things that I love. I love Murray's athleticism. I mean, that kind of ability to escape the pocket, to win with his legs as much as his arm. I mean, that's huge. But there's things that I question of his ability to function inside an actual offensive system, because so much of what he did there in Oklahoma was not within the system. There's a lot of running around. There's a lot of teams just kind of letting him sit back there for 5-6 seconds because he had such a great offensive line in front of him. How's he going to function when he has pressure in his face right away? Is he going to be able to hit those quick 3-step drop routes? I mean, there's some questions there. You got, of course, Haskins as well. Not the most athletic guy, doesn't always do well with pressure in his face. And if the Broncos want to throw deep, is he really a guy that can consistently do that? I didn't really see it there when he was with Ohio State. And then Drew Lock, just the inconsistencies, just the footwork, the lower body just not always matching up with the upper body. There's just things with each of these guys you're sitting there saying, man, I don't know. I don't know how I feel about this guy. And last year's class, I definitely had a lot better feelings about Darnold and Mayfield, and even your boy Rosen. Yeah, I don't have quite those same jittery feelings of, ooh, this guy looks really good. I want that. I don't have that this draft. And so if they take a quarterback, I definitely completely understand it because, again, you're not going to get that kind of value. You can train up this guy for a year under Flacco, then let him take over, kind of like what the Chiefs just did with Mahomes. And obviously that worked out pretty darn well for them. And it sets the Broncos up cap-wise. If this guy pans out to even be an average quarterback, I mean, that's what Flacco did. He was an average quarterback on his rookie contract, and look what they did. They built a great team around him. Boom, Super Bowl.
I mean, even last year, Trubisky was average or below average. I mean, Goff even down the stretch, probably average. So if you get that quarterback who can at least be average on that rookie contract, you can do so much for your roster. And I think bringing in a guy like Fangio, that only reinforces it.
And so I completely understand if the Broncos take quarterback. There are probably 2 or 3 other guys that I would take at 10 before I would take a Locke or a Haskins or a Murray. But if they take him, I'm going to get behind that guy for sure. Because, I mean, like I said, there's things to like about each of these guys. There's things to be worried about, but there's a lot of things to like about them too. I don't know. What are you feeling here with quarterback here at 10?
Well, I feel very conflicted about quarterback at 10 because I see people talking about the position as though, Elway has done everything so far to win now, so that means he won't take a quarterback at 10. But personally, I think you can spin it just the opposite way. Elway has been filling every single need, so that way the Broncos can't afford to go quarterback at 10. So I think Broncos don't even know yet. They're bringing in 5 quarterbacks to Dove Valley using, 1/6 of their team visits on the position. I think they're bringing in for sure Drew Lock, Haskins, Daniel Jones, Kyler Murray, and I want to say the 5th one is actually Clayton Thorson.
Yep.
And I know they've spent some time with Jarrett Stidham and some others. So, I mean, it's a super important position, and I think that it makes sense for the Broncos to say, hey, we love Flacco, blah, 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 for a number of reasons. There's been some talk that the Broncos kind of got tired of their transparency in their leaks. And so this is a year where they're going to be, Vic Fangio flat out said that they're going to be putting out smoke screens. So I'm not sure what to believe, but I do think it could go either way. So I think you can pan it either way. I think it depends on how the board falls. And there's a chance that, potentially there's a guy there that they view as so elite to their team that they can pass on the quarterback and make a run with Flacco. If they really think highly about Quinnen Williams, Devin White, maybe Ed Oliver. But I think that quarterback is still very much in play, and that the argument that the Broncos are always doing everything to win now, I think that he's doing everything to give himself absolute flexibility going into the draft, and that includes being able to go quarterback.
Yeah, I don't think I've been more confused about what the Broncos are going to do in a draft than I am this year. I look at the last few drafts, we've pretty much known kind of the direction the Broncos were going to go, or at least had a pretty good idea of where things, if certain players fell, that they were going to be picks for the Broncos. And this year, I really am stunned on who they're going to go with. There's times they talk up this quarterback class. There's times that they don't. There's times where they're talking up certain positions. Even today, though, we had Fangio talk about White and Bush, and he said, yeah, neither of them are as good as Roquan Smith.
Not as good right now.
Right now. Sorry. Yes, I should add that part.
I would say that Devin White has more upside because he has just a much more explosive, massive ability to his game. But neither of them key on runs and play as in control and can read the defense as well as Roquan Smith did coming out last year.
Right, exactly. I mean, so it's all true. But it just kind of gives that picture of, well, you valued that guy at 8. Are you going to actually value these guys at 10 if you don't think right now they're quite as good?
Yeah.
I mean, I think they will. I think they're still going to have those guys very high on their board. But it just, again, it adds to that whole picture of we have a lot of directions we could go here at pick 10 and be very happy with what we do. And there's a lot of ways that they could go that I'm sitting there saying, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Taking a quarterback like Locke makes a ton of sense. DK Metcalf, again, I mean, I'm not a huge fan of taking quarterback or wide receiver at 10, but I can make sense of it. Hawkinson, Fant, again, I can make some sense of it. And so, I mean, we're going to talk about some other positions that it's going to really make a lot of sense as we go through this. But I won't be shocked very, very much of what the Broncos do here at pick 10. There'd be a couple players I'd be like, what the heck? But beyond that, there's going to be a lot of things that make sense to add to this roster.
Yep. Cannot disagree. And now moving on, quarterback obviously in play. I don't think they'll take Daniel Jones in 10, hopefully, but I think Haskins and Locke, and maybe even trading up for one of them, is in play. So we'll see. We'll know a lot more like a week before the draft. The teams don't even know yet. They haven't had the official visits, so we'll see. But moving on, defensive line is a low-key need for this team. You got the 3 best defensive linemen on the team next year, set to hit free agency, and Derek Wolfe, Shelby Harris, and Adam Gotsis. I do think they will work out something to extend and lower the cap hit of Derek Wolfe after the draft. But as far as Harris and Gotsis goes, next season is going to be a big determinant for what they do, as well as how the draft falls. If they get a true kind of 4/5 tech kind of guy like a Jerry Tillery or a Zach Allen, then probably Gotsis is out the door, and they'll try to bring back Harris. If they bring in a guy like Ed Oliver, Jeffrey Simmons, I think probably Harris is the guy out the door. So a lot of flexibility still with those two positions. I don't think there's any way they can bring back all 3 of them. But at 10 overall, it looks like the Broncos will have a chance to bring in a pretty talented defensive lineman. And I got to say, Eric is against me. Now we got our new guy, Trevor, who is Trevor Judge. Welcome to Mile High Huddle if he's listening to this. Yeah, we've been going back and forth. I still love you, Trevor. No big deal disagreeing. That's the NFL draft for you. But Ed Oliver, if he's at 10, Carl, are you taking him, or is there other guys above him? How high is Ed Oliver on your board? I guess that's what it comes down to. Who would you take above him?
Quinnen Williams.
And that's it.
That's probably it.
Yeah. Okay.
I mean, Nick Bosa would be tough to pass on. Yeah, but again, he won't be there. There's no way that's happening. There's too many teams that need edge rush before we get there. So,
and that's the thing with edge too. Like you talk about it, like you can use 3 edge rushers, right? Like I feel like interior defensive line, the amount that you can rotate it in and out is less so than edge rusher.
Right.
So. Yeah.
Right. But no, Ed Oliver, he's probably a top 3 pick for me at the worst. I've watched so much of this guy, and I know like you talked to Eric quite a bit and his kind of thoughts of, hey, he was going against lesser competition, but I'm sitting there saying, but he's also going against 3 guys almost every single play, and he's still getting through them
and playing out of position.
Yeah. I mean, you see the absolute freak of an athlete that he is. There's plays that he's chasing guys down sideline to sideline better than many linebackers that I've watched this year. There's times where, I mean, he just has such a vertical jump to knock down passes. He has great timing of knowing when to jump up. And there's just so many ways that he impacts a game just by himself. And you just watch him and you sit there and say, this guy is special. I don't care if he's 280 pounds. He's special. I don't care that kind of weight. Usually you think of a guy getting blown off the line. I don't see it. I see a guy who can take 2-3 guys straight back into a quarterback. There's plays where I just keep picturing the idea of Von Miller and Bradley Chubb coming around the edge and a quarterback going, no, I can't step up in the pocket. Ed Oliver's right there with his guy right in my face. Yeah. I mean, just those 3 together, it just seems so special.
Yeah.
Seriously, that makes that defense become absolutely special. You add in now the secondary that they have with Simmons, Jackson, Callahan, and Harris, and I think those guys can do some amazing things this year. And so he's one of those guys I'm absolutely running to the podium. I don't care if Drew Lock is there. I don't care if Haskins is there. I don't care if Murray's there. I don't care if anybody else is there other than Quinnen Williams. Yeah. I'm picking that guy. And so it just, like I said, it just changes your whole defense. It keeps them, that defensive line, one of your strongest units on the team, and it allows a great rotation coming through. I mean, there's just so many things to like about this guy. I don't know. It gives me goosebumps talking about it.
Ooh, calm down, Carl.
I know. This is my boy. This is my guy that I just, I don't know how many drafts I've been doing now. I remember watching Aaron Donald, though, and as he was falling in the draft, I sat there and said, Broncos, trade up for this guy. Because even though he was undersized, I could see this guy's going to be special. Grady Jarrett, I remember sitting in my living room watching the draft and every round going, oh, Broncos, here you go. You got oh, no, everybody passed on him again. Next round, oh, okay, everybody passed on him. It just you see some of those guys that just are special, that you start ignoring some of their limitations or things that could be viewed as limitations, like Ed Oliver's size, and you just say, you know what, you find a way to make this guy work because he's that special. You just put him in there and you build a defense around a player like this.
Yeah, and I was talking with Derek Klassen, who we've had on the podcast before, talking quarterbacks, but he did a film article on Ed Oliver, and he said Ed Oliver is worth the first overall pick. I don't care what anybody says. He's that good. And just messaging him back and forth, I'll read what he said here. He says that there's some issues about Ed Oliver in the run game, but he thinks that's overstated. He says he's really smart and uses his hands really well and good at knowing how to work into rush lanes. And his last thing that really stuck with me, he says, if your scheme can't fit Ed Oliver, if you can't fit Ed Oliver into your scheme is bad. So especially like we're talking about valued traits in today's NFL. Behind quarterback, it's getting after the quarterback. And I think that having a guy that can get after the quarterback from the interior, especially when you add it to the edge ability of Chubb and Vaughn, you have a chance for a pretty special, synergy going on there on the defensive front, as you talked about. Didn't use that synergy word, but I like to throw it out there because I like to pretend I'm smart. So I think that I would absolutely love Ed Oliver. He's still on the same tier for me as Devin White, just because I think that 3-down linebacker and that ability to cover in Fangio's scheme is not only a huge value, but it's also a need. So I think the need pushes him up just equal with me with how valuable that interior pass rusher is. Quentin Williams a little bit higher than both of them. That's if he's there, forget sprinting to the podium. I'm taking a jetpack. I need to get there quicker. But yeah, I can't disagree with you. I think Ed Oliver would be a good player. And even if he's not an ideal 5-tech, I think Fangio, watching his scheme, it looks more like a 4-3 under, and he's using one gap. He's not using a pure 0-tech. He's using a shaded 1 technique. So I think having Oliver be out there and his ability to get in the backfield and penetrate, and, people worry about his ability to anchor. I see this guy taking on and pushing back triple teams. Granted, they're not Division I Power 5 conference kind of guys, but still, he's not going to be playing 0-tech with his head up on a center with 2 guards blocking him in the NFL either. So I think there's a little bit of give and take there. He is still raw. His hand usage, while he is okay with his hand usage, his pass rush moves are still underdeveloped, pretty much because he had to just burrow and bull rush to win against those triple teams and create penetration at Houston. But I think the skill set and the value there is just too much. And if he's there at 10 and Devin White and Quentin Williams are gone and the quarterbacks are gone, I don't hesitate. I take him. I take him over Devin Bush. I take him over any tight end. I take him over cornerback. I take him over Jonah Williams. So that's just my opinion. I think you probably, listening to you probably are very much in agreement.
Yes, very, very much so.
So, but we'll see. It's definitely a need position for the Broncos. Kind of like edge last year. You talked about a guy like Bradley Chubb, the Broncos. Oh, on the surface, they didn't need an edge rusher. They had Von Miller, Shaq Barrett, and Shane Ray, 3 pretty talented pass rushers. Well, they turn out to be the need, and then those 2 guys leave the next year. Well, this year you got your top 3 guys set to hit free agency. So we'll see. But outside of that top pick, you got guys like, if they do trade back a little bit, Christian Wilkins is in play. I wouldn't be upset if they took Jeffrey Simmons in the 2nd round. I thought he was a top 5 player before his injury. Very talented. I think Jerry Tillery is a really good fit for this defense. They're bringing in Draymond Jones for a workout. Ronell Wren for Arizona State. Then you got some other guys, some more like nose tackle types like Dalen Mack, Albert Huggins, and Tristan Hill. And then maybe even a guy like Kingsley Kiki from Texas A&M, as I know somebody they've had some interest in from Texas A&M. So it's a solid draft class. I would say it's not as deep as some people have made it out to be. I think it's more top heavy than anything. And once these guys start to go, I imagine almost all of the top defensive linemen are gone top 50. Then after that, it's a big drop off. So we'll see. It's not as deep as many people have proclaimed it to be, but it is very top heavy and talented at the top. So we'll see what happens.
All right. Well, let's move on to our next group here. And this kind of fits in with that cornerback talk, and that is the safety position. And the Broncos did actually talk to quite a few safeties in free agency, just missed out on signing Adrian Amos. And so I guess my question to start off with, is this a bigger need than some think?
It's the same thing as defensive line, although there's not the talent at the top that there is for defensive line, but you got Simmons and Parks set to hit free agency next year. Cravens isn't guaranteed to make the roster. Then after that, a lot of people want to hope on guys like Diamante Thomas or Jamal Carter, et cetera, Trey Marshall, but it's a lot of undrafted guys after that. So safety is also a need. It just doesn't fit with the top of this class this year. Unfortunately, we missed a year. If Derwin James would have been in this draft, I have him up there with any of these guys. And then in next year's class, you got Grant Delpit at LSU, who I would argue was the best player on LSU's entire team this year over Devin White. So we just missed a year, but safety is very much a need position. And, kind of like talking like with Kareem Jackson, you got a safety / cornerback, so you get some versatility, but I think it's a pretty good safety class, especially day 2. So round 3, round 4, round 2, I think the safety is very much in play.
So nobody at 10 though?
There's no safety at 10 in this class that's worth it. I don't even know if there's one worth it in the top 20. You had Deontay Thompson fall off just extremely hard. I mean, he's a solid player, but top 10, especially in a cover 2 scheme, I don't see the value there. There's no Jamal Adams this year. There's no Minkah Fitzpatrick. There's no Derwin James. It's a solid safety class as far as that depth, but top 10 talent, it's not there.
Well, then who you said day 2 picks, who are some guys maybe that you really like, and why are they a good fit?
Well, for me, some guys that I really like for this class for the Broncos, Jonathan Abram, let's say if he falls to the second round for the Broncos, watching him versus the Hawkeyes, another Mississippi State defensive product. He was flying around. He ran a 4.45, and he still has some work to do in coverage, but having a physical presence as a strong safety that can play some cover 2 in the back end and come downhill and fly around. I mean, you got to love that ability. Mr. Adderley is kind of he ran a 4.5 at his pro day. And a solid player, has some nickel ability as well. I really like Chauncey Gardner-Johnson. If you're building a defensive backfield that is more so about versatility and having some matchup guys, kind of like what the Patriots showed to do last year, I think he has a lot of ability. He might be the best nickelback in this entire class. And then you got a bunch of guys. I mean, Taylor Rapp is there, Juwan Thornhill, who tested out of the gym at the combine, really a lot of ball production as well, which is very valuable. Darnell Savage, I mean, a 4.36 40 coming downhill, flying around. And then Amani Hooker from Iowa, who had a really shockingly strong combine. I mean, his movement skills are great, and as well as his ball production. And he was a very versatile guy at Iowa as well. He played that kind of that linebacker, nickelback hybrid position, as well as safety, and he's got great ball skills. He is unfortunately a really kind of a stubby guy as far as his arm length goes. But still, I think he's a guy that if he's there, pick 71, I would absolutely do backflips for him. And then even farther down, I really like Marquise Blair's game. I like Marvell Tell from USC. I like Sheldrick Redwine, who had a really solid combine as well. So I think it's a really solid safety class. And given that both Jeffrey Simmons and Will Parks are set to hit free agency next year, it's a position that I think they'll probably go day 2, day 3. I mean, it's definitely on the table. We'll see how the board falls, but there's a lot of scheme fit guys here, and it's a solid class at safety.
Well, and I would say you look at Fangio and how he uses his safeties. I mean, that they're asked to do a lot. You look at what Chicago did. I mean, what they could do was because they had such great safety play. And so for the Broncos, I mean, I like Simmons. He had a down year, so I need to see what he can do with Fangio. And I like Will Parks, but I still don't think he's quite earned the right to say, hey, I deserve to be the starter. I think he still has to go out there and compete and show that he is the top guy. So Cravens, like you said, I don't even know if he's going to make the roster. He might make the roster more as a linebacker than a safety at this point. I mean, it's not as set of a group as you would like. And So yeah, that second, third, fourth round, it's easy to see why the Broncos might go the safety direction. And it allows you to really set up what you're going to do with Kareem Jackson too. And so if you feel like there's a guy of great value, I think that second round especially, I think you could see a guy fall there that's I would really like to see. I'm with you on Chauncey from Florida. Man, I think you'd be the perfect fit for what Fangio likes to do, bringing in a guy that's very versatile, that you can move around, play a lot of matchup football. That's exactly what you have with all these guys on our secondary right now. And so finding that kind of guy to add to it, it makes a team where they can't sit there and say, oh, we're going to put our best wide receiver against this guy because we know he's a weakness. You can't do that. And so, for the Broncos, that'd be a huge get, and I think more valuable than what people are thinking right now, because safety hasn't been a position that many have talked about for the Broncos. But I do think it is bigger than what people think.
Yeah, and with how they attacked free agency and filled a bunch of holes, it's the same as defensive line. This is a position where you're not only drafting for competition this year, you're drafting for a 2020 starter. So you got to find a guy who can play some cover two, offer some versatility in that back end. And what Fangio likes to do is that the safeties aren't so dichotomized as what we saw with the guys like Wade Phillips or even last year with Joe Woods, where you have the obvious free safety, although it didn't really work out this way last year with two free safeties on the field in Simmons and Stewart. But, both those safeties need to be able to play both the free safety and strong safety role, whether they come down the mix, hiding coverages, etc., and need to be able to play that back half of the field in that cover two deep zone. So kind of like Adrian Amos, is he strong safety? Is he free safety? Honestly, just call him safety. He's playing both roles. So that's something you need to look for. But I think it's a really strong safety class, and rounds 2 through 4, depending on how the board falls, it's a position that I expect them to target. And I see now that you said I call hooker.
Oh, no, I just put that in there to laugh at you.
Okay, because I think he's a great fit.
Yeah, I do. I really do too.
All right, well, we've still got a couple more positions to get to, but first, a quick break.
This is the Overtime Podcast Network.
Alrighty, and welcome back. And now we're going to talk the linebacker position, one that many Bronco fans are dreaming of this season. Whether it be one of the Devons, we did have the Battle of the Devon last week. Was that last week already? 2 weeks ago? I think
it was 2 weeks ago now.
2 weeks ago now. Okay, well, who knows? Time flies. But it's a position the Broncos need. If they don't address it early in this class, they'll probably go with Todd Davis and Josie Jewell. But it's something that it seems pretty obvious to me that it's a position they are looking to add talent, speed, athleticism, and coverage ability. I do think Devin White and Devin Bush are very much in play at 10, despite what Fangio's comments today were. Again, he said, hey, I'm going to be telling smokescreens, and if you're just tuning in to hear it, he said that, we talked about it earlier, that Roquan Smith was a better talent than either of the Devons right now coming out last year. But that doesn't mean that the Broncos aren't interested in that talent early on. So I think both the Devons, first-round talents, if they're there and you like them, go for it. That's your guy. But it's a solidly deep class as well. There's some other coverage guys. You got Mack Wilson, who might fall to the second round. Jermaine Pratt might fall to the third round. You got a guy like scrolling down here. Yeah, Cashman. Very interesting guy. Ben Burke-Irvin, Ty Summers from TCU. We had Matt Vanderdoes on 2 weeks ago to talk a bunch of linebacking prospects. So it's an interesting spot. I know that I've been told that the Broncos are very high on Conrad, who had a solid combine. Not the biggest guy, but a very good mover and a very intelligent football player, linebacker from Utah. So I think it is in play at 10 overall. I don't expect Devin White to be there at 10, barring some sort of thing where Tampa Bay either trades down or a player that they absolutely love falls to them. Maybe Nick Bosa, maybe Josh Allen, maybe Quinnen Williams that lets Devin White fall past him. But right now, I think it's very possible to pick, and I would put money on Devin Bush being a guy high on the Broncos boards. And right now, I think it's probably, if you put a gun on my head right now, it'd be between Devin Bush or Drew Lock as the most likely pick at 10.
Well, and you got to think of the connections with Fangio, since that's a Harbaugh guy. Yeah. Who Fangio was under for a long time there at 49ers. And so they got a lot of connections, I'm sure they're having lots of conversations. I'm sure Harbaugh has already given the thumbs up. Hey, this is a good dude. This is a great leader in our locker room, all those kind of things. So I'm sure they've gotten the 411 on who he is and ins and outs. And I'm sure Broncos definitely have him very high on their board. I've had some people ask me if I know of anything that the Broncos have talked about with him. I haven't heard anything, but I can't see how he's not high on their board. And so, again, if he's there, it wouldn't shock me one bit if the Broncos take him. And he's another player I'd be excited because he is an athletic freak. He fits a position of need. He is one of those true 3-down linebackers that can drop back in coverage and still has a pretty high ceiling that he can reach. But it still wouldn't be my favorite pick. I mean, maybe I'm getting a little too wrapped up in Ed Oliver, like it's like Ed Oliver or die kind of situation. But again, it's one of those you'd very much understand, and he would be a day one starter for the Broncos. I wonder, which position do you think he would take? Do you think he would take your Iowa boys position, or do you think it would be Todd Davis's?
I think he would take Josie Jewell's position. I think Todd Davis is a better player in the box right now, more physical, taking on blockers, and just an overall better player than Josie Jewell is. So Josie Jewell becomes more of that depth player. You're going to still have some 4-3 looks where you're going to have him out there, I'd imagine, and special teams. But I think that Davis is the better player than Josie Jewell right now. Obviously, we'll see what happens after another year of tape, although Josie Jewell is a guy coming in who was already, you'd argue, pretty close to his ceiling, how developed he was. But I think that you'd probably pair Davis with Bush. That's what I would do, at least.
Makes sense. Yeah. All right, well, let's get to our final position here. And, of course, that is the offensive line, getting into the trench talk here. And if the Broncos were to start the season right now, here's who the starters would be: Bowles, Leary, McGovern, Wilkinson, and James. Would you be okay with that group starting the season? I would not feel great about the interior.
I guess that's how you put it. You know, the offensive line, especially the interior, if you to have a better right guard or a better center and move McGovern back over to guard, I'd feel a little bit better about it. Yeah, I do want to see how these guys play out as well. I mean, you do have Munchak here, so on paper is not exactly what they're going to be after a full, OTAs and preseason. Sam Jones will obviously add some other guys, but on paper, the interior trio with Leary's health and Wilkinson and McGovern being relative unknowns at their respective positions, I wouldn't feel great about it.
Okay, so then that brings us to the next question. Is there anyone worth the 10th overall pick then for the offensive line?
I think that the only guy at 10 overall that I could probably be talked into, and that's even over tight end, is Jonah Williams. I know that he's a guy that is not an elite left tackle prospect, but I think that his versatility across the line, where he could potentially play center or right guard with his technique and versatility in both a power scheme or a zone scheme, makes him a very intriguing option. And he also offers some Bowles flexibility and leverage. If Bowles doesn't work out this year, if some of the talk about him, not being a hard worker, preferring to stay in and eat cereal and watch cartoons on his days off instead of going in and working out, then you have a guy there that has played left tackle at a high level for a while. And, he's not an elite left tackle prospect, doesn't have elite movement skills, he doesn't have elite length. But I think that leverage that you have there with left tackle position is very valuable, while adding a solid player that I think you start at right guard year one. And if you have a lineup of Bowles, Leary, McGovern, Jonah Williams, and Juwan James, that's automatically a much better offensive line. And I would argue top 12 trending upwards in the league.
I like it.
That's the only one though. I do think Andre Dillard is probably the best, in my opinion, the most valued player on my board at offensive line in this class, just because he is an elite athlete and he plays that left tackle position. But you're not moving Bowles to guard. So I feel like you're punting on pure left tackles at 10 overall in this class. Now, if you want to talk developmental guys, that's a totally different debate. But as far as a pure left tackle at 10, I don't see it. So it's Jonah Williams or bust for me in the offensive line at 10 overall. And you can really miss me with the Dalton Risner at 10 overall talk. I don't get that at all. I mean, I like him. Don't get me wrong. But 10 overall, he should be drafted from 25 to 40, not 10 overall. And I get you like the kid. I get that he approached John Elway, but absolutely missed me with that take.
I know. Some people kind of get wrapped up too much in that whole...
the narrative.
Right. The Denver connection.
Well, it worked for Philip Lindsay. If Dalton Risner is an undrafted free agent, sign me up.
Yes. That. Yeah, I'm with you there. I mean, it just, you gotta make sure to keep things in perspective of that you're making sure you evaluate the player, not the hometown.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a great story. And in the second round, if he's there at 40, I say go up there and get him. I mean, I think he's a guy, again, with that position versatility. You can kind of plug and play him wherever you need him. He's not my favorite player. I don't think he's quite the strongest guy. I think he's smart. I think he's athletic, all those kind of things, but he's not quite my favorite player to add to the offensive line. I would rather, if at pick 40, if, say, a Chris Lindstrom is there.
Yes.
I would definitely rather go that direction.
Can we prey on Bradbury a little bit, or is that too much?
I would take Bradbury.
Oh, but I mean, I'm saying prey on it.
Oh, yeah.
Obviously, we're taking Bradbury if he's there, in my opinion. I think he's somebody I would think about at 10 overall just because I think he's such a good fit. But we just saw what Elway thinks about the center position by not pairing Paradis. So that's not happening. But I really like Bradbury's game for this offense. So if he's there, he's even one that I would consider trading up for. Like if he falls to like pick 31, I was like, man, I really love this kid. And we saw last year in the draft, the Broncos are thinking, hey, we might get a solid interior offensive lineman. And then like 3 of the first 4 picks in the second round ended up being interior offensive linemen.
Right.
So if you like a guy, go get him, I think.
Right. No, I'm with you. Plus then you get that 5th-year option with him.
Yeah.
So that adds a little bit extra value to keeping him on the team. And so, I mean, those are 2 guys. If they're there at 40, I'm definitely taking. But Dalton, again, he's another guy that I'm liking there at 40. That's kind of where I see the Broncos really going for the offensive line, 2nd and 3rd round. I think that's where the real value in this draft is, that you can find a plug-and-play guy that can come in there, compete right away. I think could easily win the starting job there at the right guard spot, or move McGovern over to right guard and start him at center. I think you got that. That's the nice thing with versatility with McGovern, is that you can look at a couple different positions there for the offensive line. And I'm still not sure even if Leary's going to be on this team.
Yeah, I don't think Leary is sure of that either. Or the Broncos.
So again, it is. It's very, very much a need. And so, like I said, I could see for sure a top 3 round pick being used on the offensive line, if not 2nd round. I mean, and like you said, maybe even there in the 1st round, if some other positions are gone. I mean, he's not the highest guy on my list, but Jonah Williams, if he's there and some other guys are gone, it's definitely an understandable thing to go with him and just make that offensive line one of your strongest units on the team.
Yeah, and something to talk about. I had Brandon Thorne on last week, but talking with him, it's not like Munchak had an absence of talent on his offensive line. He had 2 first-round picks in Pouncey and DeCastro at center and right guard, which on paper are the Broncos' weakest 2 spots on the offensive line. So, yeah, no, there's a number of other guys I do want to touch on. We talked about Cody Ford. Maybe I know he's a guy that you like a lot. Would you take Cody Ford at 10? I guess we didn't even talk about him a lot in this episode.
Probably not. I mean, he's one of those guys, again, if you're trading back, there's a lot of guys I like if we trade back.
It just opens up the draft for you.
It really does. When you get those extra picks or whatever you get added to the team, you can go a lot. Yeah, it is. You can go a lot of different directions. And I really think after about pick 10, from about 11 to probably 25 or so, you got a lot of very similarly talented players.
Yeah.
And so then you're just kind of looking at that position and saying, okay, what position do we really need? I could see going that Cody Ford, going that even Dalton possibly, if you fall back there to about pick 20. The tight ends make sense. Some defensive line guys make sense. There's just so many guys that make a lot of sense when you start trading back. There's a couple guys that maybe can make it there to pick 10. If they're there, you stay. If they're not there, then you are trying to find some team that you can trade with.
Yep, I don't disagree. Yeah, so it's a couple of names that I do want to point out before we move on here and get out of here pretty soon. But Michael Dieter from Wisconsin is one to consider. Connor McGovern, the other Connor McGovern from Penn State. Michael Jordan from Ohio State. Nate Davis is one I'd consider. You got guys that really helped themselves at the Combine, and Ryan Bates and Phil Haynes. And then a guy like Eric McCoy from Texas A&M is one that's kind of becoming a popular fit for the Broncos there. And then maybe even an offensive tackle that has some versatility that can play inside, outside. Maybe a guy like Bobby Evans, Yadnika Juiced, Oli Udy, Derwin Gray, maybe an upside guy like Isaiah Prince. So, yeah, there's a number of options. So we'll see. They are going to give Munchak, something to work with. But right now, if I'm building my board at the pick number 10 overall, it's either quarterback or somebody falls to you. This is assuming no trades. The quarterback or a talent that falls to you. For me, it would either be Quinnen Williams, Ed Oliver, or Devin White. Any of those guys, I'm extremely ecstatic. Second round pick, I'm looking offensive line. Third round pick, I'm looking safety.
And all of them would stand a chance of, other than quarterback, would probably start day one.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're going to definitely challenge Will Parks there, the opposite safety. And listening to Fangio, I don't think the fan base is higher on Parks than the team is. So we'll see. What about you? Your ideal positional breakdown for how the draft falls to you, picks 1, 2, and 3.
Well, I mean, like you said, first round it is, I have Quinnen Williams, Ed Oliver, probably Drew Lock. Those are my top 3 guys. If any of them are there, I'm taking them. Otherwise, and then, Devin White, sorry, forgot about him. He'd be in that conversation as well. And so if any of those 4 are there, I'm taking them to the podium and I'm taking them. If not, I'm trying to find a trade back partner as much as I can. And then I'm with the offensive line, or I might be looking for weapon in the second round too.
Deebo Samuel could be a guy that falls.
Right.
There's a lot of X's, there's not many Y's that fit that range for me.
Yeah. If Irv Smith is there, again, another guy that I'm looking at to add to as a weapon to the team. Cornerback, I could even see that a little bit. If, Baker's draft stock has really fallen since the combine. But if you continue to look at the tape, he is a guy that deserves to be talked about in the first round. And so I could see the Broncos go in that direction. But, personally, my choice would be Ed Oliver, defensive line in the first, offensive line in the second, and then weapon in the third.
Whether it be tight end or wide receiver.
Right.
Yeah, for sure. And something we didn't talk about on here that's absolutely a need for the Broncos, maybe we'll talk about it soon, is edge depth. So not a round 1 need, probably. But edge depth is very much, we saw the Broncos when they went to the Super Bowl. One of the things that made them great, having guys like Ray and Barrett off the bench. So definitely something to ponder on. I don't think they'll use it round 1, but maybe it's a shock round 3 pick. They value those pass rushers.
They did bring in a pass rusher as one of their top 30
visits.
Yep.
Hollins, who was absolutely just dominant in the Shrine game. Dominant. Very fun player. All right, well, that's going to wrap up today's episode of Building the Broncos, powered by Overtime Media. You can find Carl on Twitter at Carl Dumler MHH, and myself at Nick Kendell MHH. Also, make sure you head on over to Mile High Huddle, an affiliate of 24/7 Sports and CBS Sports Digital, to find more content covering the Denver Broncos. Head on over to iTunes and leave us a 5-star rating and comment, as your support can help us continue to bring you our Denver Bronco deep dives. You can follow the Building the Broncos podcast and all our other great audio content by subscribing to the Huddle Up podcast, wherever you listen to your podcasts. You can follow us on Twitter at Mile High Huddle and at BTB Football Pod. For Carl, I'm Nick, wrapping up another episode of Building the Broncos. We hope you enjoyed it, and we will see you soon. Go Broncos.
You've been listening to Building the Broncos. Join Broncos Country's deep divers at milehighhuddle.com to keep the conversation going.